You may be seated. And now we consider the proclamation of former Messiah Lutheran pastor Reverend Joseph Sitler in his sermon entitled "The Care of the Earth," as published in his archives on his website. He begins, "In April of last year, I read a poem in the New Yorker magazine. The poet is Mr. Richard Wilbur. What the poet was saying struck and stuck for several obvious reasons. Beneath the quite clear apprehensions that float about just under the surface of our minds, there is a root apprehension that churns deep down at the center. It is vague, but it is also relentless and undismissible. And the poet's words interest this inarticulate anxiety. They stop it cold and give it a local habitation and a name. Now, the substance of this anxiety is common to us all, and it is heavy. It is the peculiar function of the poet sometimes to say out loud and with resonant clarity what we all wish to say had we the dark music and the language to do so. And the substance is this: annihilating power is in nervous and passionate hands. The power is really there to incinerate the earth, and the certainty that it will not be used is not there. Nor we have anodyne to hush it up or power to run away from it. We can go skiing with it, trot off to Bermuda with it, push it down under accelerated occupation with the daily round. We can pour bourbon over it, or say our prayers, each according to his tactic and disposition. But it goes along, survives, talks back. Not in abstract proposition or dramatic warnings, but in powerful earthy images, the poet makes his point. The point is single, simple, and absolute. Man's selfhood hangs upon the persistence of the earth. Her dear, known, and remembered factualness is indeed the matrix of our self. Hear the words of the poet from the New Yorker magazine. When you come, as you soon must, to the streets of our city, mad-eyed from stating the obvious, not proclaiming our fall, but begging us in God's name to have self-pity, spare us all word of the weapons, their force and range, their long numbers that rocket the mind. Our slow, unreckoning hearts will be left behind, unable to fear what is too strange. Nor shall you scare us with talk of the death of the race. How should we dream of this place without us? The sun near fire, the leaves untroubled about us, a stone look on the stone's face. Speak of the world's own change. Though we cannot conceive of an undreamt thing, we know our cost. How the dreamt cloud crumbles, the vines are blackened by frost, how the view alters. We could believe, if you told us so, that the white-tailed deer will slip into perfect shade, grown perfectly shy. The lark avoid the reaches of our eye, the jack pine loose its knuckled grip on the cold ledge, and every torrent burn as Xanthus once its gliding trout, stunned in a twinkling. What should we be without? The dolphin's ark, the dove's return, these things in which we have seen ourselves and spoken? Ask us, prophet, how shall we call our natures forth when that which lives is all dispelled, that glass obscured or broken, in which we have said the rose of our love and the clean horse of our courage, in which beheld the singing locust of the soul unshelled? and all we mean or wish to mean. Ask us. Ask us whether with the wordless rose our hearts shall fail us. Come demanding whether there shall be lofty or long-standing when the bronze annals of the oak tree close. By sheer force of these lines, my mind was pushed back against the wall and forced to ask, is there anything in our Western religious tradition as diagnostically penetrating as that problem? Or as salvatory as that predicament? Out of these back-to-wall reflections, I therefore ask your attention to several statements that seem to me deep and strong enough to make adequate sense. These statements have in common this. They deal with the enjoyment of things and the uses of things. And together they add up to a proposition that delight is the basis of right use. Now, the first statement about the enjoyment of things is the celebrated answer to the first question in the Westminster Catechism. No one will question the velocity with which this answer gets to the point, but that the point is worth getting at. For the question is, what is the chief end of man? The answer, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Now, that first verb, to glorify, is not primarily intellectual. It does not concern itself with the establishment of the existence of God or with a description of His nature. That the verb is not aesthetic either. It is not concerned to declare that God is good or beautiful or propose that it is a fair thing to worship God. Nor is it oratory. That is, it does not beat us over the head with admonitions about our duty to God. No, the verb to glorify is exclusively and utterly religious. The verb comes from the substantive glory, and that term designates what God is and has and wills within Himself. It announces the priority, the ineffable majesty, the sovereign power and freedom of the holy. Glory, that is to say, is what God is and does out of Himself. And when we use the term for what we do in response, that response is given and engendered by His glory. The priority in God and the proper work of this verb may be illustrated by its function in the 6th chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah, where the young prophet, rich and eager in his expectations of the new king Uzziah, is stunned when the king dies. He goes into the temple and then comes the vision of the glory, whose ineffable power, the face of the king, is but the reflection. The prophet says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and His train filled the temple. Above Him stood the seraphim, each had 6 wings. With 2 He covered His face, with 2 He covered His feet, and with 2 He flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory." The glory is the light that the holy give off. The earth is the theater of this glory. It is rich. The earth is rich with the ineffable glory because God, the Holy One, has made it. Now, the holy is a numinous and absolute word. It's not contained within other categories. It is a category. And the holy both evokes and demands thought. But it is a misunderstanding to assume that thoughts can contain the glory and the holy. The holy certainly has the effect that Professor Rudolf Otto, in his great work, The Idea of the Holy, calls mysterium tremendum et fascinosum. But there is an unseizable plus to the term. That eludes even the image-making genius of the Jewish people. For the holy invites prayer. It rejects such an understanding of prayer as would make prayer a tool for working upon the holy, a device for making the holy disposable by man. The holy demands service, but no service adds up to a responding equivalent. Just as in our human love, one serves the beloved, but never affirms his service to be the measure of love. So the chief end of man, then, is to glorify God. To let God be God, to understand and accept his life in ways appropriate to the imperial, holy singularity of God. The meaning of this has, to be sure, ethical, psychological, even political implications. But the center is categorically religious. But this statement about God and man, thus elevated, tough, and absolute, is conjoined in the Catechism with a concluding phrase, and to enjoy him, God, forever. The juxtaposition of commands to glorify and enjoy is on several grounds startling to our generation. To enjoy is a strange thing. That is to say, to do about the holy God before whom even the seraphim do hide their faces. This joining of the holy, which is what God is, with joy, which designates what man is to have and do in him, this juxtaposition, and that it is startling to us, says a good deal about the modern American understanding of the Christian faith. How it has come about that we are startled by what our fathers joined together without batting an eye is a matter we cannot now go into, but only observe it and ask after its significance. For we may have missed something. If the gravity of the glorification of the holy and the blithe humaneness of enjoy him forever seems strange, perhaps our churches in the very form of their buildings may be partly to blame. There's the clean, shadowless, and antiseptic colonial, the monumental melancholy of the Romanesque and Gothic adaptations, bereft of the color and adornment which in other lands are so devoutly joined in these forms. For our traditional churches affirm a kind of heavy solemnity that leaves us indeed with the lugubrious holy, but defenseless and aghast before the joy of, for instance, a Baroque church. For such a church is luxuriant, joy-bringing, positively Mozartian in its vivacity, replete with rosy angels tumbling in unabashed enjoyment among impossibly fleecy clouds against an incredible blue heaven. We shall not draw conclusions from that, only observe it and let it hang. That the gravity of a life determined by God and lived to the glory of God is not necessarily incongruent with abounding joy. But it is interesting to recall that the most rollicking music that old periwig Bach ever wrote is not dedicated to the joy of tobacco, although he did that, or coffee, and he praised that, or the inventiveness among his fellow musicians, nor dedicated to the levity of the Count of Brandenburg, but instead, in dir ist Freude, in thee is joy, in God is joy. Now the second statement is ascribed to Thomas Aquinas. Surely not the playful or superficial type. Thomas did not affirm Christianity as a consolatory escape hatch, or an incongruent or an induent to the scratchy personality, or a morale builder to a threatened republic, all of which are contemporary malformations. But he did say, it is of the heart of sin that men use what they ought to enjoy and enjoy what they ought to use. Now, apart from the claim that it is sin that men do that, and apart from the seriousness of the situation if that statement should turn out to be true, is the statement repertorially so? Yes, it is, for all of us. and in many ways. For Thomas Aquinas is simply convincing here the profound dialectic of use and enjoyment that distorts and impoverishes life when it is not acknowledged and obeyed. To use a thing is to make it instrumental to a purpose, and some things are to be so used. To enjoy a thing is to permit it to be what it is, prior to and apart from any instrumental assessment of it. And some things are to be so enjoyed. I adduce a small example. May it bloom in our minds into bigger ones. Wine is to be enjoyed. It is not to be used. Wine is old in human history. It's a symbol of nature in her smiling beneficence, the close bosom friend of the maturing sun. That is why it has virtually everywhere and always been the accompaniment of celebrative occasions, the sign of gladness of heart, joy. It is to be enjoyed. It is not to be used to evoke illusions of magnificence or stiffen timidity with the fleeting certainty that one is indeed a sterling lad. Where wine is enjoyed, it adds grace to a truth. Where it is used, it induces and anesthetizes a lie. Observe in Psalm 104 how the Old Testament man who sought to glorify God and enjoy him forever stood in the midst of nature. It says he gives wine to gladden the heart of man and oil to make his face shine. This is the day which the Lord has made, he exalts. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Why? Not primarily for what he can turn the day's hours into, but rather on the primal ground that there are days, unaccountable in their gift and character. They're just there. And here he is, permeable by all he is sensitive to. Texture, light, form, and movement. The cattle on 1,000 hills, as he says, thou sendest forth thy spirit, and they are. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It is also of the heart of sin that man uses what he ought to enjoy. It is also, says Thomas Aquinas, of the heart of sin that man is content to enjoy what he ought to use. Charity, for instance. For charity is the comprehensive term used to designate how God regards man. That regard is to be used by man for man. That is why our Lord moves always in his speech from the source of joy, that man is loved by the holy, to the theater of joy, that man must serve the need of the neighbor. Lord, where did we behold thee? I was in prison, hungry, cold, and naked. You enjoyed a charity that God gives for use. If the creation, including our fellow creatures, is impiously used apart from a gracious primeval joy in it, the very richness of the creation then becomes a judgment. This has a cleansing and orderly meaning for everything in the world of nature, from the sewage we dump into our streams to the cosmic sewage that we dump into the fallout. For abuse is indeed use without grace. It is always a failure in the counterpoint of use and enjoyment. When things are not used in ways determined by joy in the things themselves, this violates potentiality of joy. Timid as all things holy, but relentless and blunt in its reprisals, it withdraws and leaves us not perhaps with immediate positive damnations, but with something much worse. The wan, ghastly, negative damnations of use without joy, stuff without grace, of a busy, fabricating world with the shine gone, personal relations for the nature of which we have invented the eloquent term contact, staring without beholding, even fornication without finding. God is useful, but not if he is sought for use. All of this has, I think, something to say to us as teachers and students to whom this university is ever freshly available for enjoyment and use. For consider this: the basis of discovery is curiosity. And what is curiosity but the peculiar joy of the mind in its own given nature? Sheer curiosity, without immediate anticipation of ends and uses, has done most to envision new ends and fresh uses. Curiosity does this in virtue of a strange counterpoint of use and enjoyment. Bacon declared that studies are for delight, just the secular counterpart of glorify God and enjoy him forever. The Creator, who is the fountain of joy, and the creation, which is the material of university study, are here brought together in an ultimate way. It is significant that the university, the institutional solidification of the fact that studies are for delight, is an idea and a creation of a culture that once affirmed that men should glorify God and enjoy him forever. For use is blessed when enjoyment is honored. Piety is deepest practicality, for it properly relates use and enjoyment. And a world sacramentally received in joy is a world that is sanely used. There is an economics of use only, and it moves towards the destruction of both use and joy. But there's also an economics of joy, and it moves towards the intelligence of use and the enhancement of joy. That this sort of vision involves a radical new understanding of the clean and fruitful earth is certainly so. But this vision, deeply religious in its genesis, is not so very absurd now that the natural damnation is in orbit, and man's befouling of his ancient home has spread his death and dirt among the stars. The peace of God, which passeth all understanding, keep your hearts and your minds through Christ Jesus.